Hello, everyone. Tina VaLant. I'm coming to you from South Florida. I have Herbert the crab here. I'm going to bring on my very special guest. First, I'm going to introduce. So I found Dr. Don Mykles. He's with the Colorado State University. He's studied molting, physiology, endocrinology for 40 years using black-backed land crabs, a very close cousin of Herbert here. So without further ado, hello, Dr. Mykles.
Hello, Tina.
And Herbert says hello too.
I can tell.
So, Dr. Mykles, how did you get involved with crabs?
So I grew up in California, really was fascinated by marine biology. And so when I decided to go to college, I went to UC Santa Barbara as an undergraduate, majored in biology there. And that's really where I got interested in crustaceans, and then decided to pursue that area of study when I went to UC Berkeley and earned a PhD in zoology. And there I worked on crabs and lobsters and began my focus on molting physiology.
And what is the purpose of your focus? Is it to develop programs for human amputees or limb loss, or just to study the crab species?
So I would characterize my research as basic biology. So understanding how physiological processes, I'm sure you appreciate, molting is a very complicated process. And so as a physiologist, I've always been fascinated by the ability of the animal to coordinate all these different physiological processes. And molting is really critical for arthropods, crustaceans and insects, and other arthropods that have an exoskeleton that they have to shed periodically so they can grow. And so, but that's not to say that it doesn't have some practical applications. So the process of regeneration is a fascinating ability of these animals to do, and there might be some applications there for understanding tissue regeneration in maybe other animals, perhaps even humans. The other aspect of my work is really related to aquaculture and the effects of environmental change on crustaceans. So crustaceans are a very important part of marine ecosystems, and of course they're a very important aquaculture product too. Shrimp, crabs, and so forth. These organisms are excellent sources of high quality protein, and so there are countries that really rely on that as part of the way they can feed their population, Asia in particular. So China and other Asian countries have very major aquaculture industries.
Wow. So you talked about molting, and as you know, Herbert is limbless. And I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. I took some close-up pictures of her today, I call them nubblings. You're going to give us the correct name. I think it's limb buds.
We call them limb regenerates or limb buds. Yes.
Okay. How's that? Can you see that?
Yes. So, so it looks like they've cut it. There's 4 pairs of legs and a pair of claws, and on one side you have looks like you have a regenerative claw forming.
Right here, yes.
And then maybe the first and second pairs of legs. The last pair doesn't look like it has a limb bud yet, but it looks like those are fairly decent size.
Yes.
So looks like they're beginning to grow.
They are.
So what happens in limb regeneration is it kind of occurs in 2 phases. When they lose a leg or a claw, within a few days, a primary regenerate forms, a basal regenerate, and that begins to emerge from the membrane at the base of the leg or claw, and that'll stay small for it could be several weeks or months, until the animal actually enters pre-molt, and that's when it's getting ready to molt. And then in response to molting hormone, those limb buds start growing. So there's really kind of a first phase of basal regenerate formation, which is essentially a fully formed leg that's all curled up and very small. And it stays small until the animal prepares for molting, and then those limb buds grow. And so it looks like to me those limb buds are starting to grow, and so that animal probably has started pre-molt.
So what's the time frame are you guessing, looking at the size of her nubblings? A month? 2 months?
Yeah, I'm thinking probably a month or maybe even less. I'm not familiar with how long the pre-molt period is in the blue land crab. This is the common name of Carnosoma guanhumi. And so you just have to kind of watch. And it looks like it might not, it depends too. Sometimes it might not regenerate all the limbs at one time. So there's on that image that you're showing right now looks like a basal regenerate right there. So a very small limb bud, and maybe that might not grow in this cycle. Well, you just have to see what happens. I think it's really good to monitor that and record what's going on.
Oh, I am.
Yes, I can tell.
Me and the rest of the world. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. Did you see enough of that? Is there any other picture you wanted to see?
No, it looks good.
Got that. Perfect. So I stopped the share on that. So so you think somewhere maybe around the next 30 days?
That's what I'm thinking. So it's not going to be a year. If the animal progresses normally, it should be able to successfully molt. Now, one thing you might want to, generally what happens when a land crab molts, it starts to actually gulp air. And that enlarges the stomach and increases the internal pressure. And that's when the carapace, which is the most of the shell that covers the body, there's suture lines along each edge of the carapace, and it cracks, and then the animal essentially opens up in the back.
Like a trunk.
Just like that. And then they'll wiggle out of the old shell. Now they might need, so they're getting plenty. It looks like she's getting plenty of water through her diet. So it's really good to mix, have moist food. Land crabs love fruit.
Yes.
So, and they don't really need a lot of protein.
Okay.
They're really omnivores, scavengers, and so they're not really necessarily active hunters of other animals. They'll eat, carcasses of dead animals, insects, and so forth. But their primary diet is plant food, and so fruit is great. It provides water, sugars,
fiber,
and also vitamins. So it's really good.
She's kind of funny because people always ask me what's her favorite food, and I'm like, it changes every day. Like last week, little kernels of corn, and I even did an ASMR video. You could hear her eating it, which and now she doesn't want anything to do with corn, so it's weird. She's eating right now baby food, which is apple and carrot, which 2 days she's liked a lot.
Exactly. So my land crabs love raisins.
Soaked in water first?
Not necessarily. If they're getting water from, so what we feed our land crabs, and diet is pretty similar with the blue land crab, is that we feed them lettuce, iceberg lettuce, and it really doesn't have a lot of nutritive value, but it's mostly water, and so that's their primary source. We don't keep them in any sort of access to standing water at all in our crab room. We keep them at 27 degrees centigrade, 80% humidity, because they're really sensitive to drying out. So we give them, we feed them a couple times a week with lettuce, carrots, and then raisins that have been powdered with calcium carbonate. So you usually get that in a pet store, because there are lizards and other types of exotic species that need that calcium. And so if you want to do that, that would be fine too. But if she's eating the baby food, I think that's just fine.
This is lunch today, and it's a little bit, I use the Honest Kitchen dehydrated cat food, just a little tiny bit. That's that darker thing. Apple and carrot baby food, a little bit of corn on the cob, and she had a little tiny bit of I'm vegetarian, my husband's not. he made a stew, so I gave her a little bit. She's not a good protein eater. She doesn't like it, but it's
Right.
funny. She does. Her tastes change all the time.
Yeah.
One week I go to the ocean and I get ocean water.
Okay.
And I just sometimes put just a couple little drops on her.
Mhm.
And then she bathes and moisturizes her eyes. And the rest of the time I use spring water.
Good. Yeah. So that's great. You're doing all the right things. And so one thing you can do if you want is if you want to keep her from drying out, desiccating, then you might want to keep her in a terrarium or humidity chamber. So not have any standing water, but maybe have a bedding or something like that that'd be moistened with maybe what we typically do for our land crabs is we use aspen bedding. And then we saturate, we get it moist with like 5% instant ocean. So if you take, seawater and dilute it down about tenfold, then you can use that to moisten that. So you just keep the Herbert in a container where there's higher humidity.
Okay.
But I don't know what the humidity is like now in South Florida.
It's been cold right now. It's down in the 40s the last few days. But she has a little apartment, her little tiny house that she's usually out when she's out with me. And I've stopped putting her in her lid because the nubblings seem to be just growing up.
Right.
And not touching. So I'm keeping her out of that. And then this has sand with some shells that I collected the other day. So I try to keep her as close to her natural. That's my background as a wildlife volunteer. Is you always want to simulate their natural surroundings as much as possible. So that's really what I've tried to do. And that's why she naps during the day. When I'm doing stuff, she'll go in. I put her in her apartment in my dark closet, maybe with the last day, a little heating pad on the very bottom, not near her, just to keep her a little bit warmer or in the sun.
Great.
So, how close are the blackback land crabs related to this species? And are they about the same size or bigger?
The blue crab is much larger. In fact, what you have there is probably a juvenile. The blue line crabs get much larger than that.
The marine biologist we talked to said he thinks she's about 5 years old, a full-grown adult.
I don't think I've seen larger guana.
Here I live in Boca Raton, and she was found in Gulfstream, just a little bit to the north. I've never seen one this big. Just, maybe that area.
Right. So yeah, I'm to be quite honest, as I said, communicated with you, I'm kind of surprised that there are any of these blue line crabs in South Florida because of the development of their habitat. But if there are patches of large enough kind of wild vegetation where they can have and suitable substrate that they can burrow in, because the burrows are also very important for their survival. It obviously protects them from predation, but when it gets too cold or too hot or too dry, they will go down their burrows and avoid those extremes of environmental conditions.
Yeah, and that's what Evan told me. They go down to the water table, so that's why I try to keep a little bit of water. The other day when I was at the beach, look what I found.
Oh.
I didn't show it to her.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure what claw that belongs to. It looks like more of that might actually could be a young stone crab.
Yeah, I think that's what my husband said. So one thing I get asked a lot in TikTok is she in pain? Is she suffering? Why don't I put her out of her misery? Can you address invertebrates and pain? Because what we think happened because of the way that was cut. My brother has a huge landscape company, and he said sometimes when they stop a mower for lunch or to talk to somebody, a client, they've seen a land crab come out, attach itself to the rotor upside down to protect their burrow, and then when the mower gets on, they lose it.
Right. I don't think that happened because, it looks to me that this animal was attacked by a predator, and what they do is and oftentimes predators see or grab the animals by their legs or claws, and to escape, they'll autotomize. Autotomy means self-amputation. And basically, it's the same sort of phenomenon that you see in lizards. where they drop their tail
Right.
and can regenerate their tail.
Right.
It's actually a voluntary mechanism. It's a decision by the crab to drop the leg and use that as a way to escape. So
Would
if
it
you
be
have a predator grabbing a leg, then it drops the leg and then it can run away.
right? But this was all the limbs.
Well,
And the other reason we thought this was at the one nature center a couple years ago, they had the exact same case and the people saw it happen.
well, it looks, but it looks to me from what you showed me is that that's a very clean break.
Yes.
So that would not be from any sort of lawnmower or anything like that. If that happened, if it didn't happen at that, what happens in that autotomy is that when it drops the leg, there's actually a membrane that contracts and closes the stomach.
Oh, because it was
There's
clean.
no blood loss. If that was an injury from a lawnmower, the animal would bleed to death.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
And so that tells me, or one possibility is that it did get damaged by a lawnmower, and they had to drop their legs to minimize the blood loss. Right? When a leg is either injured severely or seized by a predator, they can autotomize those legs. So obviously, we don't really know what happened. But at least the reason why this animal has survived is that it was able to autotomize its legs and claws, and that's where the regeneration can take place.
So to answer the question, people say, "Oh, it's in misery, put out of its pain." And I found her on a Thursday afternoon 6 weeks ago today, and I called the nature center the next morning because I found her, like 4:30, 5 o'clock. So I just kept it upright in a cup and fed it a little bit of pineapple, and it was alert and the eyes were perky and it was eating. And they said, one of them said, just put it in the freezer and euthanize it. I said, I can't, she's eating and she seems like she has a will to live. And then other people like, oh, it's in pain. Can you address invertebrates in pain? Because I don't think an animal that's in distress eats, interacts, or acts like this.
The fact that these animals voluntarily drop their legs this is not pain at all. This is a survival mechanism, and they can regenerate those legs. And, if they do, they can go back to a normal activity. So I would not say just because it's missing legs, it's in pain. And even, it's really hard to even think that, crabs and invertebrate even interprets pain in the same way we do, right? We don't know. We do not know what a crab perceives. So I'd say you have to be very careful about translating human perceptions to a crab. It has its own experience of existence, right? And it evolved very differently. And they are adapted to a particular style of living and habitat. And arthropods are just as successful, maybe even more successful than mammals or vertebrates have been, given the vast diversity of different types of arthropods occupying virtually every habitat on Earth. And so it's just different. It's a different style, That's
different strokes for different folks.
And so I would not say the animals would experience pain, or at least certainly wouldn't experience pain like we would experience pain.
And I think an animal, I've been in wildlife care for 20 years and rescue, and animals that are in pain or distress give up the will to live. They stop eating, they stop interacting, they huddle, they close down. When she's tired, her mouth closes up and she's done. The eyes will go flat. She's sleeping. She's done. And this is how she is when she's awake, when I'm around. When I come in, the eyes twitch. So I want to be attentive of your time. So we're rounding out almost to your time limit. Dr. Mykles, what can we all do to help not only crabs, but nature in general? We know the usual reduce, recycle, and things, but from your experience, what's something we can do to make the world a better place?
Well, I think we're, especially for protecting wildlife, I think the first basis is to protect habitats. if you don't have habitats, then of course you're not going to be able to preserve wild populations. So really, I think it's mostly gets down to land use and accommodating perhaps climate and other environmental changes that could threaten wildlife. But there's been enormous success in marine communities by creating sanctuaries, essentially creating zones in oceans that are off limits for fishing and other types of human intervention, because we've seen that biology has enormous potential to recover,
right,
if given a chance. But if you don't have the habitats to make that happen, or sanctuaries, reserves, it's not going to work, right? And it's important too that recognizing that preservation of wildlife is preservation of a whole ecosystem, right? All the plants and animals that occupy those areas. Without that, you're not going to be very successful.
So we're getting some great comments. Thank you, everybody who's joined in on the Facebook page. So Caroline's asking, do you think her legs will regrow to full size?
The legs probably will. The claws, they're so much larger than a leg. The regenerated claws will be smaller. But the next time the animal molts, those claws will get incrementally larger. But they'll be fully functional claws. They just won't be as big.
Yeah, and hopefully she'll have me to rely on. Do you think, in your experience, that she will be able enough to take care of herself back in the wild, or she should just plan on being a house crab?
I think once she has her legs back and has mobility and has claws that she can use to manipulate food, then I think there's a really good chance that she would survive in the wild. You don't necessarily.
I thought about putting like one of those tiles on her to track her, like they track the great white shark.
Well, that'd be pretty cool. Just to make sure she's doing okay.
Yeah, I'll be the hover helicopter mother, like, oh, there's a raccoon in the area. I've got to go.
Well, there's got to be more blue crabs, out in that place where you found her. So
I've been kind of stalking that area and around Delray Beach and Gulfstream because I want to either get a video or picture with my camera so I can see what she's going to look like. And I've gone online and Googled the Cardassoma guanhumai, and it's so weird to see them with legs. But I've been stalking them, but they're very elusive. Very
elusive. They are. Well, they tend to be nocturnal too. So you really have to go out, at night when they're active to find them. During the day, they pretty much stay in their burrows, and sometimes it's even hard to find their burrows. They're pretty well hidden among the limbs and roots and detritus of the floor of a forest, say, for example. So you just have to probably go out at night and with a flashlight and actually a flashlight would be a good way to stalk them, because what happens is that if you blind them with the flashlight, they tend not to react and go back into their burrows.
Oh, okay.
They don't detect the flashlight as a danger.
Okay, so when it gets a little bit warmer, because it's been in the 40s down here.
I'm in Colorado. I don't have any sympathy for you guys down in South Florida.
We don't deal with hurricane season to deal with this stuff, okay? I'm from Indiana originally, and this is why I live in Florida. I don't like being cold. So,
well, you're in the right place then.
Good. So
you probably want to wait till it warms up a little bit.
A little bit. So thank you so much, Dr. Don Mykles with Colorado State University, the Crab Lab. I'm going to put a link in the comments for his deep look into regeneration and molting. And I thank you so much. I emailed you and I said, I feel like I hit the lottery finding you, and you actually picked up the phone, and you've been such a delight. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been fun, and I'm glad it can be of help. But keep me posted.
I will
see how Herbert does.
Well, you got to admit, she's probably the most famous crab right now, right?
I'm amazed.
Yep, she's been on Right This Minute, Daily Dose of Internet, and the Coastal Star newspaper. So she's getting around, and we want to just continue to spread inspiration and share kindness. And this is like I love animals, and this is not an animal I ever imagined I'd be sharing my home with in my life and hours of daily care. But I think she does have a personality. Have you, with your crabs in the lab, do you notice different personalities?
A bit, yes.
No?
Yeah, some are more aggressive than others, and things like that. But yeah, they're really fascinating animals. They really are.
They are.
They're such a very different way of experiencing the world, and so it's fun.
I know what I did want to ask you. I told you the only crab stuff I can find is like this $266 land crab textbook. So I know the stalks are the eyes.
Yes.
What are these two little things that I call the peepers?
Those are antennules. So those have sensory structures that detect the environment. So chemicals, odorants.
Smell. I notice when she eats, they're like little animals.
Right. So that's and they have a ton of chemoreceptors around their mouth parts, so they can taste. And they also have mechanoreceptors, which are on their legs, and they can actually use those to detect vibrations. Yeah,
I read that they can detect like a piece of fruit falling from a tree, or even like a palm seed to go, track over to it and eat it.
If it produces odorants, they'll move to it and appear very quickly. Because it's in the tropics, things don't last very long.
Right.
So they have to get to that food before someone else does.
That sounds good. Well, thank you so much for visiting today with Dr. Donald Mykles at Colorado State University. And thank you again for your time and your expertise. And Herbert and I and all of us Herbert fans send you lots of luck and care in the crab lab. Tell Herbert, her people in the crab lab, that she says hi. You will continue to fight the good crab fight and regenerate. And I look forward to visiting with you again soon, and we will definitely be in touch.
My pleasure. Yes.
Take care. Bye, everybody. We're going to sign off now.